Hi, my name's Randy Romero, and I'm here today to share some old school knowledge with you about canning. Back in the old days, they used to put up sweet pickles and dill pickles for the winter. But today we're focusing on salsa, growing all the ingredients in your own garden, making your own particular personal brand of salsa, and canning it for year-round enjoyment. Believe it or not, there are large food corporations who would rather you didn't know how to do these sorts of things. They'd rather have complete control over the food supply and have you rely on them. But with economic times being hard, I think we could all benefit by being able to grow our own food and preserve it at home and eat better year-round. I went online to look for salsa recipes and found a really good publication from Pacific Northwest Extension. One thing that they talked about was the importance of keeping the proportions accurate. Tomatoes are acidic. Limes are acidic. Onions and peppers, on the other hand, are not. And in order for the hot water bath type of canning, those ratios are important, so you have the right amount of acidity in order for the canning to be done safely. And my disclaimer is, I'm not responsible for your canning. You need to do your own research and get your own guidance and make sure you're following very safe protocols so that you have good food later on in the year. What we're about to do is the very final stage in the preparation and canning of the salsa. What we won't be showing today is all the chopping of peppers and the chopping of onions and the blanching of tomatoes and the peeling of the skins and the chopping of tomatoes. I've done all that in advance, and what we're doing today is the final assembly process in this 20-quart enamel stock pot. So first, the tomatoes. For salsa, they recommend Roma tomatoes or paste tomatoes because they're meatier, they're less juicy. And as you can see here, these are the paste tomatoes. But I didn't have enough ripe at the time to do 2 big batches. So I also had to harvest all my other tomatoes. And this, as you can see, is much juicier. This has sandwich size, it has cherry tomatoes, and the big orange tomatoes. So what we'll be doing is blending these together, half and half, in 2 big batches. All right, now this recipe calls for 7 quarts of tomatoes. I had just a little over 6 quarts of Romas, so I'm going to put 3 in here. 1, 2, 3. That's the Roma tomatoes. Now I'll go ahead and grab 4 quarts of the other. That's a pretty hefty quart right there. We'll call that a little, that's 1 plus, 2 plus, 3, and 4. Now, it took hours and hours to prepare those tomatoes, just so you know. And that step, dumping them in the pot, that was pretty easy. Okay, let's get this baby fired up. I guess it's important with these enamel pots not to fire up an empty pot or to let it boil dry, they say. Okay. I grew Spanish onions in the garden because they're mild and I just love the flavor of a Spanish onion. Recipe calls for 5 cups chopped. And I shed a few tears over this one. For 4.5 cups of chopped peppers, not specifying what kind of peppers. This year I grew 5 varieties that I like. Cayenne and jalapeno and Hungarian wax. They each have their own brand of hotness. And then the mild peppers I included sweet banana peppers and Cubanelle peppers. If you've never had a Cubanelle pepper, they're awesome. delicious. And as you can see, it's not very red. I used mostly mild peppers with a smaller percentage of hot peppers. And you could do that to your own taste, of course. 5 different kinds of peppers, all grown in the backyard this year. The recipe calls for 6 cloves of garlic, but I like garlic, so I don't know how many cloves this is, but it's quite a bit more than 6 cloves, and that's the way I like it. And the only ingredient that I couldn't grow in the garden was lime juice, and it calls for 2 cups of lime juice. Put it in here. Now, 2 tablespoons of salt. I prefer Mediterranean sea salt, enhanced by nature, essential minerals. This is not iodized. This is the good stuff, you know. It's what your body really needs. All right, so 2 tablespoons of that. There's 1, 2, and then 1 tablespoon of black pepper. So what we're going to do is bring this to a boil. Very colorful, nice. And then once we bring it to a boil, we'll reduce the heat and simmer it for 20 minutes. Let all these goodies cook together. Now the first batch I made a couple weeks ago, I made mild. But I decided for this batch I want to go in the direction of hotter. Every year in my garden I grow cayenne peppers. And if you take a needle and thread and can you see that? And you sew through the stem there, you can hang them up to dry, which this pepper is dried. Once they dry, then you can run them through a coffee grinder and you've got your own homegrown dried cayenne pepper. So on this batch I thought, yeah, let's go a little bit hotter here. Let's amp this sucker up a bit. This should make approximately 20 pints, quarter of a tablespoon per pint, 5 tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I also grew kung pao. These are brutal. And when I make my next batch, I'm going to toss in some kung pao. So I have mild, hot, and look out, buddy. Alright, now I'm going to bring that to a boil. This is cilantro that I grew in my garden in 2008. And the problem with cilantro is that it comes ready to use for about a 2-week period. And if you're not ready to make salsa, what do? Well, a gourmet chef told me, harvest the leaves, wash them, chop them up like you're going to cook, and then put them in a jelly jar and saturate them with olive oil and keep pushing those leaves down until it's saturated all throughout with olive oil, and then put it in the freezer and it'll keep for a long time. The reason I'm adding the cilantro in at the end of the cooking process is so that the flavor won't cook completely away. That was another thing the gourmet chef told me.